This is advanced theoretical mathematics, not remedial algebra, Professor Arthur Whitmore said, loud enough for 212 students in Astor Hall to hear. Jordan Hayes stood frozen in the doorway, with rain on the shoulders of his old gray hoodie, a frayed backpack hanging from one strap, and a pair of faded black sneakers still squeaking against the polished lecture hall floor. In one hand, he held a campus library time card. In the other, he held a battered notebook with a cracked leather cover, its pages swollen from years of pencil marks, coffee stains, and equations written in the margins by a man who was no longer alive. The room laughed. Not loudly at first, just enough. Enough for Jordan to feel every row turn into a wall. Professor Whitmore looked him up and down, his silver pen tapping once against the podium. "Are you sure you're in the right room?" Jordan did not answer quickly. He only nodded. Whitmore smiled. "Then let us test that confidence." He turned to the blackboard and wrote an equation so long it stretched across 4 panels, filled with nested summations, nonlinear operators, a boundary condition, a strange symmetry term, and one symbol that made even the graduate assistants sit forward. Then he faced Jordan again. "If you solve this, Mr. Hayes, I will apologize before the entire class." More laughter. Emily Carter, 3 rows from the front, stopped smiling, because everyone understood what was happening. This was not teaching. This was punishment. But within 20 minutes, the laughter would be gone. Within 20 minutes, Professor Whitmore would be standing beside his own equation, pale and silent, while the freshman he mocked revealed a flaw hidden in the professor's original research notes. And within 20 minutes, the name JH-17 would begin moving through the lecture hall like a secret becoming a storm. But at 9:07 a.m., Whitmore still believed the boy in the old hoodie was only a mistake admissions had made. That was the mistake. Astor Hall 314 was the largest mathematics lecture room at Caldwell University, a private school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where ivy climbed the stone walls outside and wealth moved through the campus so quietly that students sometimes forgot it was there. The room looked more like a courtroom than a classroom. Tiered oak seats rose in precise rows. Brass lamps lined the aisles. 3 blackboards stretched across the front wall beneath a digital projector displaying the course title, Math 481, Advanced Theoretical Structures. Professor Arthur L. Whitmore, Fall Term, Week 2. On the side screen, the attendance system glowed blue. Registered students, 213. Present, 212. Missing, Hayes Jordan. That was where the morning had already begun to turn against him. Jordan had not meant to be late. At 5:10 a.m., and he had unlocked the side entrance of Caldwell's Sterling Memorial Library with a student worker badge that still looked too new on his lanyard. His shift began at 5:15. He shelved returned books, wiped study tables, sorted interlibrary loan envelopes, and helped an elderly visiting scholar locate a misfiled volume on analytic number theory in the basement stacks. He had planned to leave at 8:20. Then the library printer jammed. Then a graduate student spilled coffee across the reserve desk. Then his supervisor asked if he could stay 10 more minutes because the morning staff was short. Jordan had said yes. He always said yes. Because his scholarship covered tuition, but not everything else. Not his mother's bus pass, not groceries, not the medication copay she pretended was lower than it was, not the phone bill that kept disconnecting every 2 months. By 8:48, he was running across campus through cold rain, holding his notebook under his hoodie so the pages would not get wet.
By 9:04, he reached Astor Hall. By 9:07, Professor Whitmore made him a lesson. Whitmore was 63, elegant, famous, and feared. He had written 2 textbooks, supervised 16 doctoral students, and delivered invited lectures in Zurich, Paris, and Princeton. His office wall displayed framed certificates, conference photographs, and one black and white portrait of himself beside a Fields medalist he had never stopped mentioning. He believed in rigor. That was what he called it. But rigor, in Whitmore's classroom, often sounded like humiliation when aimed at the wrong student. He knew the names of students from Exeter, Andover, Trinity, St. Paul's, Phillips, Dalton, and Horace Mann before they introduced themselves. He remembered competition medals, family connections, graduate recommendations, and which students had already published summer research. Jordan Hayes had none of those markers, at least none that Whitmore had bothered to read. His admission file said, first-generation college student, full chancellor's equity scholarship, public high school graduate, library work study, no formal Olympiad record. Whitmore had seen the phrase Chancellor's Equity Scholarship and decided the rest without needing evidence. That was how prejudice often protected itself. It called assumption experience. When Jordan stepped inside, the professor had been discussing invariant transformations across nonlinear recursive structures. 3 graduate students were seated near the wall taking notes for the seminar section. The front rows were filled with students who had already begun competing silently for future recommendation letters. Jordan stood in the doorway, breathing hard. "I'm sorry, Professor," he said. "My work shift ran late." Whitmore's eyebrows lifted. "Your work shift?" A few students chuckled. Jordan held the time card lower. "Yes, sir." Whitmore glanced toward the attendance screen. "Mr. Hayes, this course is not designed for casual participation. It is not a place where one arrives when convenient between errands." The room went very still. Jordan felt the words settle on his skin. Errands. A word that made work sound childish. A word that made needing money sound unserious. He kept his voice quiet. "It won't happen again." "No," Whitmore said. "It should not have happened once." In the third row, Emily Carter looked up sharply. She had noticed Jordan during the first class. Not because he spoke. He had not spoken at all, because he took notes faster than anyone she had ever seen. No laptop, no tablet, only pencil. He did not copy equations, he seemed to compress them. Whitmore turned back to the board as if dismissing Jordan would end the scene. Jordan began moving toward the back row. Then Whitmore stopped. "Actually, Mr. Hayes." Jordan paused. "Yes, Professor?" "You entered at a useful moment. We were discussing structural reduction. Perhaps you can help us." A boy near the aisle muttered, "Here we go." Jordan heard him. So did Emily. Whitmore picked up a piece of white chalk. "Tell me, Mr. Hayes, what is the primary obstacle in solving nonlinear operator equations with hidden recurrent symmetry?" Jordan stood halfway up the aisle, backpack still on one shoulder. The correct answer depended on context. The question was broad enough to trap someone who guessed. Jordan looked at the board, then at the notation Whitmore had already written from the lecture. "The obstacle is usually not the nonlinearity itself," Jordan said quietly. "It's identifying which variables are structural and which are decorative. If the recurrence is hidden inside the operator, you can waste the whole proof solving the surface." The room shifted. A few students stopped smiling. Emily sat straighter. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "That is a memorized phrase?" Jordan shook his head. "No, sir." "Then define decorative variables." Jordan adjusted the notebook under his arm. "Terms that change the difficulty of the expression without changing the invariant behavior. They make the equation look larger than the actual transformation space." A graduate assistant near the wall looked up. Whitmore heard the reaction. He did not like it. Authority is comfortable when students are wrong. It becomes fragile when the student it underestimated is right. Whitmore gave a thin smile. "Very interesting." The word interesting sounded like a door closing. "Since you have such confidence in the invisible structure of equations, perhaps you would not mind joining us at the board." Jordan's stomach tightened. He looked toward the back row. An empty seat waited there. Safe, silent, far from the chalk. For 1 second, he wanted to keep walking. Then he felt the cracked leather notebook in his hand. His father's notebook. Marcus Hayes had been a watch repairman in Roxbury with no college degree, a magnifying lens clipped to his glasses, and hands steady enough to place a screw smaller than a sesame seed into a mechanism built 80 years before he was born. He used to tell Jordan, "Math doesn't care what you wear, where you come from, or what they think they see when you walk in. If you're right, you're right." Jordan touched the edge of the notebook. Then he turned toward the front. The lecture hall watched him descend the aisle. Every step seemed louder than it should have been. The old sneakers squeaked once on the polished floor. Someone laughed again. Whitmore waited beside the center board, his posture elegant, his smile mild enough to be denied later. That was part of his skill. He humiliated students in a tone that sounded like standards. Jordan reached the front. Whitmore handed him the chalk. But before Jordan could take it, the professor pulled it back slightly. "One caution," Whitmore said. "In this room, guessing quickly is not the same as thinking deeply." The laughter came harder this time. Jordan did not look at the class. Emily did. Her face tightened. "Professor," she said, "he answered your first question correctly." Whitmore turned toward her. "Miss Carter, I appreciate your concern, but correctness in one sentence does not establish readiness for this level of work. It also doesn't justify making an example of him." A murmur moved through the room. Whitmore's smile vanished for half a second, then returned. "I am not making an example of anyone. I am inviting Mr. Hayes to demonstrate the confidence he brought into the room." Jordan knew that was not true. He had brought no confidence, only a late apology and a wet hoodie. But Whitmore needed the class to believe otherwise. A public humiliation works best when disguised as fairness. Whitmore turned to the board and began writing the problem, line after line. A recursive functional equation over a constrained domain, a spectral term, a modular condition, a nested operator, a boundary expression at x equals 0, a symmetry condition written with almost theatrical complexity. The chalk squealed once against the board. That sound made several students wince. Jordan did not. He watched the equation build itself. At first it looked ugly, then familiar. Not the exact problem, the shape, a problem wearing a mask. Whitmore stepped back after filling nearly half the board. "This," he announced, "is a variation of a problem I once presented in a graduate seminar. No first-year student has solved it in my classroom. Several advanced students have tried. Most found it educational." He turned toward Jordan. "You may begin." A student in the second row whispered, "That's impossible." Another whispered, "He's doing this because the kid was late." Emily's hands clenched around her pen. Whitmore heard enough to enjoy it. Then he added the final cut. "If you solve this, Mr. Hayes, I will apologize before the entire class. If you cannot, perhaps you will better understand why placement matters." Placement. Jordan understood the word beneath the word, belonging. The room waited for him to shrink. Instead, he looked at the equation. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Whitmore folded his arms. "Do you need the question explained?" Jordan shook his head. "No, sir." "Then what are you waiting for?" Jordan looked at the left boundary term, then at the recurrence condition, then at the modular exponent near the third line. Something was wrong. Not difficult wrong, incorrect wrong. A sign. A single minus sign in a place where the structure collapsed unless it had been copied from a different version of the problem. Jordan did not speak yet. He set his backpack down, opened the cracked notebook, not to search for an answer, to steady himself. Inside the front cover, written in his father's hand, was a sentence Jordan had carried through every room that underestimated him. Never ask the world for permission to be intelligent. Jordan closed the notebook. Then he took the chalk. "May I use the full board?" The room burst into laughter. Whitmore's smile widened. "By all means." Jordan turned to the blackboard. For a moment, the lecture hall disappeared. No laughter, no professor, no polished oak seats. Only symbols, only structure, only the quiet place in his mind where the world stopped judging and began obeying logic. He lifted the chalk and wrote the first line. Part 2. The Quiet Endurance. Jordan Hayes wrote the first line slowly, not because he was unsure, because he knew the room was waiting for a mistake. The chalk touched the board with a soft, dry scrape. He did not begin by attacking the largest expression. He did not expand the nested operator. He did not try to impress the class with speed. Instead, he drew a small box around 3 terms on the left side. Then he wrote, "Let the visible complexity be separated from the invariant structure." A few students frowned. Someone in the 5th row whispered, "What does that even mean?" Whitmore heard it and smiled. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "this is not a philosophy seminar." A few students laughed. Jordan did not turn around. He only placed a small mark beside the recurrence term and wrote a second line beneath the first. The graduate assistant against the wall stopped tapping his pen. Emily Carter leaned forward. Because even if the class did not understand what Jordan was doing yet, she could see one thing clearly. He was not guessing. He was organizing the problem before touching it. That was not panic. That was method. And method had a history. 6 hours earlier, Jordan had woken up before his alarm in a second-floor apartment in Dorchester, where the radiator knocked in the walls and the window above his desk let in a thin draft no towel could completely stop. The clock on his phone read 4:38 a.m. His room was small enough that when he sat up, his knee nearly touched the wooden chair beside the bed. The walls were painted a faded yellow from a tenant before them. On the desk sat 3 objects he never moved: a broken silver pocket watch, a folded scholarship letter from Caldwell University, and his father's cracked leather notebook. The pocket watch no longer ticked. Jordan could have fixed it years ago. He knew how. He had repaired harder mechanisms by the time he was 12, but he kept that one broken because it had stopped at 7:16 p.m., the exact time the hospital called to say Marcus Hayes had passed. Some objects are not kept because they work. Some are kept because they remember. Jordan sat on the edge of the bed and listened. From the living room came the soft sound of his mother breathing. Denise Hayes had come home from her night shift at Boston Mercy Hospital 40 minutes earlier, still wearing navy scrubs, too tired to make it to her bedroom. She was asleep in the armchair with one shoe off and her employee badge still clipped to her pocket. Jordan walked out quietly. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee, disinfectant, and the lavender detergent his mother bought only when it was on sale. A half-eaten granola bar sat on the kitchen counter, her dinner. Jordan picked up the blanket from the couch and draped it over her shoulders. Denise stirred. "Jordan? It's me, Mom. You got class?" "Work first." She tried to sit up. "There's bus money in my purse. I'm good." "You always say that." "So do you." That made her smile without opening her eyes. He kissed her forehead. Her skin was warm with exhaustion. "Don't skip breakfast," she murmured. "I won't." He would. They both knew it. On the small kitchen table was an unopened bill from Boston Mercy Insurance Services and a grocery receipt with 3 items circled in red. Jordan saw them and looked away, not because he did not care, but because care had already become a calculation in his head. Work-study paycheck Friday, library shift hours, textbook rental refund, bus pass renewal, mom's medication copay. Numbers were easier than fear. That was one reason Jordan loved mathematics. Numbers did not pity him. They did not ask where he lived. They did not lower expectations when they heard he was on scholarship. They did not look at his hoodie before deciding whether his answer deserved to be heard. His father used to say, "Math is the only room where the truth does not care who walked in with it." Marcus Hayes had never been a professor. He had never published a paper. He had never stood in an auditorium with a microphone and a university crest behind him. He owned a narrow watch repair shop on Blue Hill Avenue, with a bell above the door, a scratched glass counter, and a sign that read, "Hayes Clock and Watch Repairs, Batteries, Bands, Restorations." Behind the counter, Marcus taught Jordan more mathematics than most schools could have. Ratios came from gears. Prime numbers came from teeth that would not align until the full cycle completed. Functions came from pendulums. Limits came from springs tightened almost but not quite to the breaking point. When Jordan was 7, Marcus placed the broken pocket watch on the counter and opened the back. "See that?" he asked. Jordan leaned close. Tiny gears nested inside one another like a city made of circles. "It's beautiful," Jordan whispered. "It is," Marcus said. "But beauty is not the point. The point is rhythm. Every complicated machine has a rhythm inside it. Find the rhythm, and the machine tells you what it needs." Jordan remembered that. Years later, when equations began looking less like schoolwork and more like locked mechanisms, he still searched first for rhythm. Not the answer, the rhythm. When Jordan was 9, he corrected a mistake in an 8th grade algebra workbook his teacher had borrowed from another class. When he was 11, he proved the Pythagorean theorem 3 different ways after his father asked him whether there was more than one path to truth. When he was 13, he discovered the math forums at the Roxbury Public Library because the home laptop had died and stayed dead. The library computer had a cracked spacebar. The internet froze every 20 minutes. He had only 1 hour per day unless no one else was waiting. That was where JH17 was born, not as a plan, as a login name. J for Jordan, H for Hayes, 17 for the number of teeth on the first watch gear his father let him remove by himself. At first, nobody noticed him. On the forums, graduate students argued, professors corrected one another, and anonymous users with Greek letter avatars posted problems for sport. Jordan read everything. He rarely commented. Then one night, a user from Berlin posted a recurrence problem that had stalled a discussion for 3 months. Jordan stared at it for 7 minutes, then saw the rhythm. He wrote a solution in plain text because the library computer did not support the formatting tool correctly. It was messy. It was elegant anyway. By morning, the thread had exploded. Who is JH-17? Is this from a paper? This is too clean to be original. Check the transformation in line 4. That's new. Jordan read the comments the next afternoon while eating a vending machine honey bun for lunch. He did not reply. When Marcus saw the printout, he smiled in the quiet way that meant pride had gone too deep for noise. "You solved it?" "I think so." "You think so?" Jordan shrugged. "They're arguing." Marcus laughed. "That usually means yes." Then he said the line Jordan never forgot. "People will look at you before they read your proof. So sometimes, let the proof walk into the room first." That was why JH17 stayed anonymous. No photograph, no school name, no biography. No hint that the person solving graduate-level problems at midnight was a black teenager in a public library, wearing headphones with one broken side while his father closed a watch shop across town. At 14, Jordan corrected a boundary case in an online preprint. At 15, he posted a proof so original that an Oxford doctoral student asked whether JH17 was a retired analyst trolling the forum. At 16, Professor Arthur Whitmore cited a JH17 transformation in a conference talk without knowing the source was a boy doing homework between library shifts and hospital visits. Jordan had watched the video once, only once.
Whitmore stood at a podium in Zurich and said, "The anonymous contributor JH-17 offered a surprisingly refined reduction, far beyond what one expects in an informal forum." Far beyond what one expects. Jordan had paused the video there. His father was already sick by then, sitting in a recliner beside the window because the stairs had become too much. Marcus listened and smiled. "He respects the work," Marcus said. "He doesn't know it's mine." "Good." Jordan looked at him. "Good?" Marcus nodded. "Now you know the work can stand without your face. One day, make sure your face can stand beside it." Jordan did not understand how soon he would need that. Marcus died 9 months later. After the funeral, Jordan stopped posting for almost a year. The forums kept asking where JH-17 had gone. Nobody knew that grief had taken the password out of his hands. Nobody knew that the boy behind the username had begun working evening shifts, helping his mother with bills, and doing math late at night only when sadness made sleep impossible. Nobody knew he almost gave it up. There was one night, 2 months after Marcus died, when Jordan opened the cracked leather notebook, saw his father's handwriting, and slammed it shut, because memory had become unbearable. He sat alone at the kitchen table until 2 a.m., the pocket watch in front of him, the scholarship application unfinished beside it. He whispered, "I can't do this without you." The apartment answered with radiator knocks and distant sirens. Then his eyes fell on a folded scrap of paper tucked into the notebook. Marcus had written it during one of his hospital stays, in handwriting weaker than usual. "Don't ever ask the world for permission to be intelligent." Jordan read it once, then again. Then he opened the scholarship application and finished every page before sunrise. Caldwell University accepted him on March 18th. Full Chancellor's Equity Scholarship. Tuition, housing option, meal stipend, research access. His mother cried over the letter. Jordan did not. He held the paper like it might disappear if he reacted too strongly. Then came the emails. "Welcome to Caldwell. Placement exam instructions. Course registration. Work-study assignment." And one message from the Department of Mathematics. Subject, Math 481, enrollment approval, conditional review. "Professor Whitmore has approved your enrollment pending continued demonstrated readiness." Conditional. Even in acceptance, there was a test hidden. Jordan printed the email and placed it inside his father's notebook. Not because it hurt, because it reminded him. Some rooms would open the door and still ask why he was standing there. Now, in Astor Hall 314, Professor Whitmore watched Jordan write on the board and mistook his silence for fear. But Jordan's silence had always been full of his mother sleeping in scrubs, full of his father's hands fixing timepieces under a lamp, full of library computers, full of anonymous proofs, full of every moment someone looked at him and decided they already knew the limit of his mind. He wrote the 3rd line, then the 4th, then the 5th. A student in the front row, Nathaniel Price, whispered, "He's just rewriting the problem." Nathaniel came from a school where the calculus building had a donor plaque with his family name on it. He had laughed first when Jordan entered, not because he hated him, because cruelty is easier when the room gives permission. Emily heard him and whispered back, "No, he's removing the disguise." Nathaniel looked again. Jordan had taken the monstrous equation and separated it into 3 regions on the board: surface terms, recurrence, structure, symmetry, core. Whitmore's smile faded slightly, not enough for the class to notice, enough for Emily to notice. Jordan stepped back and studied the original equation. Then he circled the sign near the boundary condition, the wrong sign. He did not say anything yet. He could have exposed it immediately. He could have turned around and embarrassed the professor with one sentence. But that would have been revenge. Jordan did not want revenge. He wanted the truth to become undeniable. So he kept writing, line by line, quietly. The room began to change. The laughter thinned. The whispering stopped. Pens paused above notebooks. One graduate assistant stood up from the wall and moved 2 steps closer to the board. Whitmore saw that. His expression tightened. Jordan wrote a transformation no one expected. Then another. Then he drew a small gear shape beside the recurrence term without thinking, a habit from childhood. Emily saw it. So did Whitmore. "What is that?" the professor asked sharply. Jordan looked at the tiny gear. For half a second, embarrassment warmed his face. Then he answered, "A reminder." "A reminder of what?" Jordan held the chalk loosely. "That complicated systems usually repeat before they reveal." The class went silent. Whitmore did not like the poetry of that. He liked mathematics clean of the people who carried it. But Jordan had never learned math that way. For him, every equation had the smell of watch oil, library dust, hospital antiseptic, and rain on an old hoodie. He turned back to the board. The next line made the graduate assistant whisper, "Oh." Not loud, but in a lecture hall holding its breath, it was enough. Whitmore heard it. His hand tightened around the silver pen. Jordan was no longer trying to prove he belonged. He was doing something worse for Whitmore. He was making the room forget the insult. Part 3. The pressure escalates. By the time Jordan Hayes reached the 12th line of the proof, the lecture hall had stopped laughing. That was when Professor Whitmore began to understand the danger. Not danger to mathematics. Mathematics was safe. Mathematics did not care who held the chalk. The danger was to the story Whitmore had built in the first 5 minutes of class. The story where Jordan was late, unprepared, underqualified, and useful only as a warning to the others. That story was collapsing, line by line. Jordan crossed out 2 terms from the original expression and rewrote the recurrence as a compressed mapping. A graduate student near the wall whispered, "That shouldn't work." Another whispered back, "It does if the operator is periodic under reflection." Emily Carter turned slightly. "What does that mean?" The graduate student did not answer immediately. He was too busy staring at the board. "It means," he said slowly, "he found the hidden symmetry." Professor Whitmore heard that. His jaw tightened. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "before you continue, I would advise you not to introduce unverified transformations." Jordan turned around. His face was calm. "This one is verified by the second boundary condition." Whitmore gave a short laugh. "You have not used the second boundary condition yet." Jordan pointed to the lower left corner of the board. "I did. I just wrote it in normalized form." The room shifted again. A few students leaned forward. Nathaniel Price, who had laughed earlier, stopped smiling completely. Whitmore stepped closer to the board, silver pen still in his hand. He examined Jordan's line. Once, then again. The pen stopped tapping. That was the first visible crack. Jordan turned back and continued. He did not write like a student trying to survive a challenge. He wrote like someone cleaning a window that everyone else had mistaken for a wall. He separated the equation into 3 layers, just as he had said. The surface terms were ugly and crowded, built to frighten the eye. The recurrence structure repeated every 4th transformation. The symmetry core reduced the whole problem to a smaller identity, hidden beneath the professor's notation. Emily felt the room beginning to understand before it could admit understanding. That was the strange thing about genius. At first it looked like arrogance, then it looked like luck, then suddenly it looked inevitable. Jordan moved to the second board. "Excuse me," he said softly to a student seated near the front aisle. The student moved his backpack without a word. Jordan wrote, "The apparent complexity is not the obstacle. The copied sign is." Whitmore's head snapped up. "What did you just say?" Jordan paused. He looked at the original equation again, then at the professor. "There is a sign inconsistency in the boundary condition." The room went silent so quickly the projector hum became audible. Whitmore's face hardened. "Be careful, Mr. Hayes." Jordan nodded. "I am." "Are you suggesting I wrote my own problem incorrectly?" Jordan looked at the board. "I'm saying if the negative sign remains here, the equation collapses into a contradiction over the real domain. There is no real valued solution under the conditions you gave." A student muttered, "No way." Another opened a laptop. Whitmore stepped closer. "Show it." Jordan did. No drama, no smirk, no revenge. He simply wrote 4 lines beneath the boundary term. The contradiction appeared cleanly. too cleanly. The final line read, 0 less than minus k squared, impossible over real k. A murmur traveled through the hall. Jordan put the chalk down for a second. If the original source intended the positive sign, then the solution exists. If not, the problem is unsolvable as written. Whitmore's face went pale by one shade. Not enough for the whole class to see. Enough for Emily. Enough for the graduate assistants. Enough for Whitmore himself. Because he knew exactly where the sign came from. 3 years earlier, he had presented a version of this problem at the North Atlantic Mathematical Structures Symposium. It had been part of an unpublished research note he liked to use as an intellectual trap in advanced seminars. In the original note, the sign was positive. In the version he copied onto the board that morning, he had written it negative. He had been so eager to humiliate Jordan that he had not checked his own weapon. That was the mistake inside the mistake. Whitmore recovered quickly. "This is a common trap in advanced work," he said. "I wanted to see whether you would notice." The sentence sounded smooth, almost believable, but Emily saw his hand. It moved to the cuff of his jacket and adjusted it twice. A nervous habit. Jordan looked at him. He could have challenged the lie. He did not. Not yet. Instead, he picked up the chalk again. "Then I'll solve the corrected version." The room exhaled as one body. Whitmore blinked. "You will what?" "The corrected version." Jordan erased the negative sign and replaced it with a positive one. The chalk dust floated in the cold lecture hall light. Then everything changed. Jordan began to solve the problem Whitmore had actually intended, not the broken version, the real one. And that was worse for the professor, because discovering the error could have been luck. Solving the corrected equation could not be. At 9:23 a.m., a student in row 7 lifted his phone and began recording. At 9:24, 2 more students did the same. At 9:25, a graduate assistant opened a departmental Slack channel and typed, "Something strange happening in Whitmore's 481. Freshman caught sign error and is solving board problem live." He hesitated, then added, "Not joking." The message went to 11 people. One of them was Dr. Helen Brooks's administrative coordinator. But no one in Astor Hall knew that yet. Jordan filled the second board. His handwriting was not beautiful, but it was clear, compact, fast. Every line carried the previous one without waste. He worked through the classical route first, the long path Whitmore expected any legitimate attempt to take. Eigenstructure, reduction, recurrence mapping, boundary reconciliation. Then he stopped. He placed a vertical line down the board. On the left, he labeled the work classical path. On the right, he wrote compressed symmetry path. Whitmore stared. "Where did you learn that term?" Jordan turned. "I named it." A few students laughed, but this time the laughter was nervous. Whitmore stepped closer. "You named it?" "Yes, sir." "In what publication?" Jordan hesitated. "Not a publication." "Then we should be careful with invented terminology." Emily spoke before she could stop herself. "Isn't all terminology invented before it's published?" The room reacted with a low murmur. Whitmore turned slowly. "Miss Carter, I suggest you take notes instead of commentary." Emily's face flushed, but she did not look down. Jordan saw that. And for the first time since entering the room, he did not feel completely alone. Whitmore faced Jordan again. "Proceed." The word came out like a challenge. Jordan proceeded. He drew a small circle around the recurrence core. Then he did something that made the graduate assistants stand up. He converted the operator sequence into a symmetry compression using a transformation that reduced 4 pages of work into 5 lines. One assistant whispered, "That's JH-17. The other turned. "What?" "That reduction. I've seen it." Where? Forum archive, 3 years ago. The anonymous proof on recursive invariance. The whisper spread one row behind them. JH-17. Someone typed it into a search bar. Someone else opened MathStack Exchange archives. Another searched the International Recursive Structures Forum. Jordan kept writing. He did not know the name had entered the room behind him. Or maybe he did. His hand tightened slightly around the chalk. Whitmore heard it too. JH-17. The name touched something in his memory. A Zurich talk. A slide with an anonymous proof. His own voice saying, "This contributor shows remarkable maturity." Whitmore looked at Jordan's back. Old hoodie, frayed backpack. Library time card.
No Olympiad record. No private school background. No academic family. Impossible. That was the word his pride chose. But mathematics does not care what pride finds impossible. Jordan reached the final reduction. He turned to the class. If the corrected boundary condition is accepted, the solution set is not a single expression. It's a family constrained by the symmetry core. He wrote the final answer. Then beneath it, he added a second root, shorter, cleaner, almost elegant. The room was completely silent now. Not polite silent, stunned silent. Jordan set the chalk down. White dust coated his fingers. His hand trembled once, only once. Because the worst part of being underestimated is not proving people wrong. It is having to remain calm while they realize they were never really looking at you. Professor Whitmore stared at the board. The proof covered nearly 3 full panels. His impossible equation had been corrected, solved, and improved in front of 200 students.
Still, he tried to survive. "That is an interesting attempt," he said. The word attempt made Emily's head turn. Jordan looked at him. The graduate assistant spoke before Jordan could. "Professor, it's not an attempt." Whitmore's eyes cut toward him. "Mr. Larkin?" The assistant swallowed, then stood straighter. "It's correct." The hall stirred. Whitmore's face hardened. "I will evaluate correctness." Jordan picked up his notebook. He seemed ready to return to his seat. But then Nathaniel Price, the student who had laughed first, looked down at his laptop and whispered, "No way." Emily turned. "What?" Nathaniel's face had changed. Not impressed, shaken. He turned the screen toward the student beside him. The archived forum page showed a username at the top. JH-17. Below it was a proof from 3 years earlier using the same compressed symmetry framework. The title read, "Reduction of Fourth-Order Recursive Invariant with Boundary Coupling." A comment beneath it, posted by Arthur L. Whitmore, read, "Remarkably refined. Whoever JH-17 is, this contributor thinks well beyond their apparent level." Nathaniel looked from the screen to Jordan, then back again. The whisper became louder. JH-17. Is that the same method? No, look at the notation. Wait, Whitmore commented on this. Who is JH-17? Professor Whitmore went still. Jordan heard the name now. He closed his notebook slowly. Emily looked at him. "Jordan?" He did not answer. Whitmore turned toward the class. "That is enough. Phones away. This is not a circus." But it was too late. The room had found the open loop, and Jordan, for the first time that morning, looked less afraid of being mocked than of being recognized. That fear told Emily the truth before he said a word. Whitmore walked to the first row where Nathaniel's laptop remained open. He looked at the screen, saw the username, saw the old proof, saw his own comment. Then he looked back at Jordan. "No," he said quietly. No one was supposed to hear it. But the microphone clipped to his lapel caught the word and carried it through the speakers. No. One syllable, more revealing than any confession. Jordan stood in front of the board, chalk dust on his fingers, his father's notebook against his chest, and 200 students waiting to know whether the boy they laughed at had been the mind their professor once praised. Whitmore asked the question because he had no choice. "Mr. Hayes," he said, voice thin, "do you know the person who used the name JH-17? Jordan looked down at the cracked notebook. He could almost hear his father. "One day, make sure your face can stand beside it." Jordan took a breath. Then he looked up. "Yes, sir." The room held still. Whitmore's lips parted. Jordan's voice was quiet. "That was me." Part 4. The Reveal and Authority Shift. "That was me." Jordan Hayes did not say it loudly. He did not say it with triumph. He said it like someone placing a fragile object on a table and waiting to see whether the room would finally stop trying to break it. For 2 seconds, nobody moved. Then Astor Hall 314 erupted. Not into laughter this time, into disbelief. "What? No way. JH-17 is a freshman? He solved the Eardos-Larkin thread. That's impossible." "Pull up the archive." Phones came out again. Laptops opened. Students leaned over one another's shoulders, scrolling through old forum posts, screenshots, citations, and conference notes. The name JH-17 began appearing on screens across the lecture hall like a ghost that had just been given a face. Professor Whitmore stood at the front of the room, his silver pen frozen between 2 fingers. He had built his entire morning on one assumption: Jordan Hayes did not belong here. Now the room was watching that assumption die. Whitmore forced a laugh. It was a small sound, dry, unconvincing. "Class," he said, "let us not confuse internet usernames with academic credentials." The words landed badly. Even students who had laughed earlier felt it. Because the proof was still on the board. Because the corrected sign was still circled. Because Whitmore's own old comment was open on Nathaniel Price's laptop. Remarkably refined. Whoever JH-17 is, this contributor thinks well beyond their apparent level. Emily Carter stood. "Professor, you cited JH-17 in your Zurich talk." Whitmore turned on her. "Miss Carter, sit down." She did not. The room noticed. So did Jordan. Emily's voice shook, but she kept going. "You praised the method when you didn't know who wrote it. Now that you know, you're calling it an internet username." Whitmore's face tightened. "That is not what I said." "It is exactly what you're doing." A hush spread through the room. There are moments when one person says what everyone else is thinking, and the silence afterward becomes evidence. Whitmore looked toward the graduate assistants. "Mr. Larkin, please close those tabs and return this class to order." The assistant, Daniel Larkin, did not move. He was 26, a third-year doctoral candidate whose funding depended partly on faculty evaluations. He had spent 2 years laughing at Whitmore's sharper comments because it was easier than becoming their target. Now he stared at the board, at Jordan's proof, at the old forum archive on his tablet, at the freshman in the hoodie holding a notebook like a shield. Daniel swallowed. "Professor," he said, "I think Dr. Brooks should see this." Whitmore's eyes flashed. "She is busy. She's already been notified." The sentence changed the room. Whitmore went still. "What?" Daniel looked down. "I posted in the department Slack when Jordan caught the sign error. Dr. Brooks's coordinator saw it." Whitmore's face hardened. You had no authority to involve the department chair in my class. Daniel's voice was quieter now, but steadier. No, sir. But I had a responsibility. That was the first time all semester Daniel had contradicted Whitmore in public. And once one person stopped kneeling before the professor's authority, others began remembering they had legs. Nathaniel Price raised his hand halfway, then lowered it, then raised it again. I can confirm the archive, he said. The JH17 proof uses the same notation, same compression step, same gear symbol in the margin on one uploaded image. Jordan closed his eyes briefly. The gear. He had forgotten about that. In one old post, the library scanner had captured the edge of his scratch paper, a tiny gear drawn beside the recurrence. His father's habit had followed him into the evidence. Whitmore seized on the hesitation. This proves nothing. Anyone can copy notation. Jordan looked up. Professor, I can log in. The room went quiet again. Whitmore blinked. What? Jordan reached into his backpack and pulled out an old phone with a cracked screen protector.
The case was taped at one corner. He opened a password manager app, then hesitated. His thumb hovered above the screen. For years, JH-17 had been separate from Jordan Hayes. Safer, cleaner, a place where people met his mind before meeting his skin, his clothes, his zip code, his scholarship category, his late arrival from work. To log in here was not just proof. It was surrendering the last room where he had been judged only by the work. Emily seemed to understand. You don't have to, she said softly. Jordan looked at her, then at Whitmore, then at the board, then at the cracked leather notebook. He heard his father again. One day, make sure your face can stand beside it. Jordan entered the password. The projector screen behind Whitmore flickered as Daniel connected Jordan's phone through the classroom document cable. The International Recursive Structures Forum appeared on the side screen. Username JH-17. Last login 14 months ago. Account created October 9th, 2018. Recovery email j.hayes17@roxmail.org. jhayes17@roxmail.org. A gasp moved through the hall. Jordan clicked the profile. Old posts appeared. Proof threads, corrections, comments from doctoral students. Messages from researchers asking if JH-17 would consider submitting a note for review. Then Daniel opened the private archive requested by Jordan. One draft file appeared. Title: Symmetry Compression in Recursive Boundary Operators. Author field: JH. Created April 12, 2022. Attached image: handwritten derivation on lined notebook paper. Daniel zoomed in. At the corner of the scanned page was the same handwriting now covering Whitmore's blackboard. And beside line 7 was a small gear. Everything froze. Then the door at the back of the lecture hall opened. Dr. Helen Brooks entered without hurry. She was 58, tall, composed, with silver hair tied at the back and reading glasses hanging from a black cord. She did not need to raise her voice to change a room. Her reputation did that before she spoke. Behind her came Associate Dean Malcolm Reyes, the department administrator, and a quiet woman from the Office of Academic Equity named Priya Nair, holding a tablet. Whitmore's posture changed immediately. "Helen," he said, forcing warmth into his voice, "this has become an unfortunate distraction." Dr. Brooks looked first at Jordan, then at the board, then at the side screen, then at Whitmore. "I can see that." Whitmore stepped forward. "A first-year student arrived late. I asked him to engage with a challenge problem, and the class allowed the moment to become theatrical." Emily whispered, "That's not what happened." Dr. Brooks heard her. "We will get to what happened."
She walked toward the board. The room watched her read. Line 1, line 2, the separation into surface terms, recurrent structure, and symmetry core. The contradiction under Whitmore's copied negative sign, the corrected boundary condition, the classical path, the compressed symmetry path. She took a piece of chalk and marked one transition near the center. Jordan's heart sank. For one terrifying second, he thought he had made a mistake. Dr. Brooks turned. "Why did you choose this mapping instead of the standard spectral decomposition?" Jordan swallowed. "Because the spectral decomposition solves the noise before identifying the rhythm. The recurrence repeats under reflection every fourth transformation, so the compression preserves the invariant and removes the decorative terms." Dr. Brooks's eyes sharpened. "Decorative terms?" Jordan nodded. The equation was written to look harder than its structure. Most of the difficulty is visual. A few students turned toward Whitmore. Whitmore's face stiffened. Dr. Brooks looked back at the board. Then she wrote one word beneath Jordan's proof. "Valid." The lecture hall exhaled. But she was not finished. She moved to the final line and checked the boundary reconciliation. Then the transformation. Then the corrected sign. Finally, she stepped back. "This solution is correct," she said. The room erupted in applause. Jordan flinched slightly. He was not used to applause being safe. Dr. Brooks raised one hand and the room quieted. "It is also more elegant than the method currently taught for this class of problem." The second silence was even deeper. Whitmore stared at her. "Helen, with respect, that is an overstatement." "No," she said, "it is not." He smiled tightly. Perhaps the student recognized a method from online discussions and reproduced it under pressure. Dr. Brooks turned toward him. "Arthur, the online method appears to be his." Whitmore's mouth closed. Dr. Brooks gestured toward the screen. "The archive is authenticated by account history, timestamp records, recovery email, and identical manuscript images. The department can verify further through platform logs if needed." Priya Nair tapped her tablet. "I've already requested preservation of the recording from lecture hall camera 314-B and the classroom microphone feed." Whitmore looked at her sharply. "Recording?" Associate Dean Reyes spoke for the first time. "All large lecture halls record automatically for accessibility and dispute review. You signed the faculty notice August 26th. Whitmore had forgotten. That was another mistake. Jordan had not. He had seen the small black camera above the back aisle the first day of class. He had noticed everything. People who are watched unfairly learn to watch back. Dr. Brooks faced the class. "I need someone to tell me why Mr. Hayes was at the board." Nobody moved. Emily stood again. This time, her voice did not shake. "Jordan arrived late because he came from a work-study shift. Professor Whitmore asked if he was sure he belonged in the room." People laughed. Then he asked Jordan a hard question. Jordan answered it. Professor Whitmore didn't like that, so he wrote this equation and said if Jordan solved it, he would apologize in front of everyone. Whitmore cut in. "That is a hostile interpretation." Nathaniel Price slowly stood. "It's true." The room turned toward him. Nathaniel looked uncomfortable, but he continued. "I laughed when Jordan came in. I thought what the professor wanted us to think. But Emily is right. The problem wasn't part of the lecture. It was meant to embarrass him." That admission mattered. Not because Nathaniel was noble, because he had been part of the room that laughed, and now the room could not pretend it had only watched. Daniel Larkin spoke next. Professor Whitmore also referred to Jordan's work shift as errands and implied he wasn't ready for the class. Another student added, "He said placement matters." Another, "He pulled the chalk back when handing it to him." Another. He called the solution an attempt after it was clearly right. The room that had laughed was now testifying. Whitmore stood very still. Power often looks calm when it is protected. It looks different when the record starts filling without permission. Dr. Brooks looked at Jordan. "Mr. Hayes, is this accurate?" Jordan could feel every eye return to him. He hated this more than solving the equation. Equations did not ask him to accuse people. Equations did not make his throat tighten. He thought of his mother sleeping in scrubs, his father's note. The pocket watch stopped at 7:16. He could say no. He could make the room easier for everyone. He could survive quietly. He had done that before. Then he looked at Whitmore, and for the first time, he understood something his father had tried to teach him. Silence can be dignity. But sometimes, silence becomes permission. Jordan stood straighter. "Yes," he said. Dr. Brooks nodded once. Whitmore's voice sharpened. "I was protecting academic standards." Jordan looked at him then, not angry, clear. "No, Professor." The room stilled. Jordan continued. "You were not testing whether I understood the material. You were testing whether I would break in front of everyone." Whitmore's lips parted. Jordan's voice remained quiet. "You did not ask me to solve the equation because you believed I might. You asked because you believed I couldn't." No one breathed. Jordan looked at the board, then back at him. "I don't need you to apologize because I solved it. I needed respect before you knew I could." The words landed harder than the proof, because the proof had exposed the professor's mistake. That sentence exposed the reason for it. Dr. Brooks removed her glasses. "Professor Whitmore, effective immediately, I am assuming instruction of this class for the remainder of the week. You will leave the lecture hall and report to my office at 1 p.m. for a formal review." Whitmore blinked. "Helen, that is unnecessary. It is required. On what grounds?" Dr. Brooks looked at Priya Nair. Priya read from her tablet. "Potential violation of Caldwell Faculty Conduct Policy 4.2, Discriminatory Classroom Treatment. Policy 7.1, Misuse of Instructional Authority. And Policy 9.3, Public Humiliation or Retaliation Against Students." Whitmore's face went pale. "This is absurd." Associate Dean Reyes said, "The lecture recording will be reviewed. Student statements will be collected. Professor Whitmore, please gather your materials." For the first time in decades, Arthur Whitmore stood in front of a class and did not control what happened next. He looked at the board, at the solution, at Jordan, at the student he had tried to turn into a cautionary tale. Then, slowly, he placed his silver pen on the podium. He had tapped that pen all morning like a judge's gavel. Now it sounded very small when it touched the wood. Whitmore gathered his notes. No one laughed. No one clapped. No one rescued him from the silence he had created. As he walked toward the door, he passed Jordan.
For half a second, it seemed he might say something. An apology, a defense, a warning. Instead, he kept walking. The door closed behind him. Only then did Dr. Brooks turn back to Jordan. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "would you be willing to explain your compressed symmetry path to the class?" Jordan looked at the board, then at the students. Many of them could not meet his eyes. Emily could. So could Daniel. So, finally, could Nathaniel. Jordan picked up the chalk again. His fingers still trembled, but this time nobody laughed. "Okay," he said softly, and for the first time that morning, the room listened before judging. Part 5. The Reckoning, Legacy, and Cité. At 1 p.m., Professor Arthur Whitmore sat in Dr. Helen Brooks's office with the door closed, the blinds half drawn, and the lecture recording playing on a screen in front of him. He had watched himself ask Jordan Hayes whether he was in the right room. He had watched the class laugh. He had watched himself pull the chalk back before Jordan could take it. He had watched himself call a correct proof an attempt. The worst part was not that the recording made him look cruel. The worst part was that the recording made him look familiar. Like a man he had been for years without ever having to watch himself from the outside. Dr. Brooks sat across from him, hands folded. Beside her was Priya Nair from Academic Equity, Associate Dean Malcolm Reyes, and a faculty conduct officer named Laura Voss. On the table lay 3 printed documents: Caldwell Faculty Conduct Policy, the student statements, and Jordan's solution, photographed from the board. Whitmore looked older than he had that morning. His tie was loosened. His silver pen lay untouched beside his folder. For once, he did not tap it. Dr. Brooks stopped the recording at the moment he said, "Perhaps you will better understand why placement matters." She looked at him. "What did you mean by that?" Whitmore inhaled slowly. "I meant the course has prerequisites. Jordan met them. I was not aware of the full extent of his background." Priya Nair leaned forward. "Respectfully, Professor, the issue is not whether you knew he was JH-17. The issue is why you believed he deserved less respect before you knew." Whitmore opened his mouth, then closed it. There are questions intelligence cannot escape. This was one of them. He looked at the printed solution. The proof was beautiful. That made it harder. Whitmore had spent his life worshiping elegance in mathematics. He admired proofs that cut through noise, revealed structure, and arrived at truth without begging for permission. Jordan had done exactly that, and Whitmore had tried to humiliate him before reading the work. He thought of Zurich, the conference hall, the slide where he cited JH-17, his own voice saying, "This contributor thinks well beyond their apparent level." Now the words sounded different, their apparent level. Even when he praised the anonymous mind, he had praised it through hierarchy, through assumption, through the need to measure who should be allowed brilliance. Dr. Brooks spoke quietly. "Arthur, you are one of the most accomplished mathematicians in this department. That is not in question. But accomplishment does not protect students from your bias. Sometimes it sharpens it." Whitmore stared at the table. "I did not intend racial harm." Priya's voice remained calm. "Intent will be noted. Impact will be addressed." That sentence ended the easiest escape route. By 3:30 p.m., Caldwell University had opened a formal review under case number CAD-MATH-481-0922. Professor Whitmore was removed from direct instruction of Math 481 pending investigation. His graduate advising duties were temporarily suspended. Every student in the course received an email from the Office of Academic Affairs. Subject: Math 481 Instructional Review and Student Support. The email did not name Jordan. It did not need to. Everyone knew. Within 24 hours, students had submitted 14 written statements. The classroom camera confirmed the timeline. The microphone confirmed Whitmore's tone. The attendance record confirmed Jordan was 7 minutes late after a documented work-study shift. The department Slack preserved Daniel Larkin's first message before anyone understood what the moment would become. Something strange happening in Whitmore's 481. Freshman caught sign error and is solving board problem live. That line became evidence too. Not because it proved misconduct, because it proved the truth had been visible before the power structure was ready to admit it. Jordan did not attend the afternoon review. He was across campus in the basement of Sterling Library, sitting alone between shelves labeled QA300 to QA329, where the calculus and analysis books lived. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. His backpack sat on the floor. His father's notebook was open on his lap. He should have felt victorious. He did not. His hands were still shaking. Public recognition had its own violence when a person had spent years surviving by being unseen. A video clip of the lecture had already begun circulating, even though Dr. Brooks had ordered students not to post recordings. Someone had filmed from row 7. The title was predictable. Professor tries to embarrass black student, gets destroyed by math genius. Jordan hated it. Destroyed. As if the point had been destruction. As if his father had taught him mathematics so one day he could become a weapon in someone else's viral revenge. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he wanted to disappear back into JH-17. No face, No scholarship label. No students whispering. No professors apologizing. Only the proof. Then he felt someone standing near the end of the aisle. Emily Carter. She held 2 paper cups of coffee and looked like she had rehearsed 3 different openings and trusted none of them. "Can I sit?" she asked. Jordan nodded. She sat on the floor across from him, placing 1 cup near his shoe. "I didn't know how you take it. I don't drink coffee." "Oh," she looked at the cup. "Then I brought you terrible tea." For the first time all day, Jordan almost smiled. Almost. Emily looked down at the notebook. "Was that your father's?" Jordan's hand moved over the cover. "Yeah." "He taught you?" "More than anyone." She nodded. Then she said the thing nobody else had said. "I'm sorry we laughed." Jordan looked up. "You didn't. The room did." "I was in the room." That mattered. Not because Emily had been cruel, because she understood that silence sits closer to harm than people like to admit. Jordan looked at the shelves. "I'm tired." "I know." "No," he said softly. "I don't mean sleepy." Emily did not answer too quickly. That was why he kept talking. "I'm tired of people respecting the answer after they disrespect the person. I'm tired of having to be extraordinary before I get treated normally." Emily's eyes lowered. "That was what you meant in class." Jordan nodded. "I don't need everyone to think I'm a genius. I just wanted him to let me sit down." The sentence stayed between them. Small. Heavy. At 5:15 p.m., Dr. Brooks found Jordan in the library basement. She did not bring cameras. She did not bring reporters. She brought a folder, a scholarship adjustment form, and a quiet respect that entered before she did. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "may I join you?" Jordan stood automatically. "You don't have to stand." He sat back down slowly. Dr. Brooks sat on the wooden chair across from him. "I reviewed your forum archive," she said. "Not all of it. Enough." Jordan looked uncomfortable. "I wasn't trying to hide anything bad." "I know. I just didn't want people to look at you before reading the proof." Jordan looked up. Dr. Brooks's expression softened. "I understand more than you may think." She opened the folder. "The department would like to offer you a research fellowship. It would replace your work-study income and provide a stipend. You would not have to stop working if you choose not to, but you would not have to choose between shelving books at dawn and arriving on time to a course you have every right to take." Jordan stared at the paper. Amount: $18,000 annual research stipend. Tuition and material supplement, $4,500. Faculty mentor, Dr. Helen Brooks. Research track, symmetry methods in nonlinear structures. His throat tightened. "My mom." "We can also connect her with the University Family Support Office for health benefits navigation." Quietly, no publicity. Jordan looked down. He was not used to help that did not ask him to perform gratitude in public. "What do I have to do?" "Work," Dr. Brooks said. "Think. Challenge us. Publish when ready. And tell us when the room is making it harder for you to learn than the mathematics is." Jordan almost laughed. "That might be the harder assignment." "I know." He touched the pocket watch inside his hoodie, the broken one. "Professor Whitmore?" Dr. Brooks did not soften the answer. "He will face a formal conduct process, mandatory bias review, removal from first-year and gateway courses for at least 1 academic year if the findings support it. His advising practices will be audited. Past student complaints will be reviewed." Jordan nodded slowly. He shouldn't be destroyed. Dr. Brooks studied him. No, but he should be changed. And if he refuses, he should not keep power over students. That was fair. Justice, Jordan realized, did not have to be cruel to be serious. 3 days later, Professor Whitmore returned to Astor Hall 314, not to teach, to apologize. Dr. Brooks stood at the side of the room. Associate Dean Reyes sat in the back. Priya Nair was present too, not as a threat, but as a witness. The class was full, though the air felt different now, less careless, less hungry for someone else to become entertainment. Whitmore stood at the podium. His silver pen was gone.
For once, his hands had nothing to hide behind. "I owe this class an apology," he began. His voice sounded older. "Last week, I used my authority in this room to humiliate a student. I framed that humiliation as academic rigor. It was not rigor. It was arrogance." No one moved. He turned toward Jordan, who sat near the back again, not because he had been pushed there, because he chose the seat. "Mr. Hayes, I treated you as though you had to prove you belonged before I owed you basic respect. That was wrong." Jordan listened without expression. Whitmore continued. "I also owe you a more specific apology. Years ago, I praised the work of JH17 when I did not know who had written it. Last week, when I saw the same brilliance attached to a student I had already underestimated, I questioned it. That contradiction reveals something shameful in me." The room stayed silent. This was not the kind of apology that asked for applause. Good. Whitmore looked down once, then back up.
"I have said often that mathematics is objective, but I forgot that classrooms are built by people, and people can bring prejudice even into rooms devoted to truth." He faced Jordan fully. "You did not need to prove you belonged in this class. I need to prove I deserve to teach students without deciding who they are before they speak." Jordan did not forgive him in that moment, not fully. Forgiveness is not a performance either, but after a long silence, he nodded once. Not approval, acknowledgement. A door opened a fraction. That was enough for one day. By the end of the semester, Caldwell's Department of Mathematics had changed more than the syllabus. Anonymous diagnostic placement reviews were introduced for advanced course enrollment, removing names, scholarship categories, high school background, and demographic markers from initial mathematical assessment. Faculty received new training on public correction, instructional power, and bias in gatekeeping courses. All large lecture challenges outside the syllabus required a stated pedagogical purpose, not humiliation disguised as difficulty. Student work-study conflicts had to be considered in attendance policy if the university assigned both the job and the course schedule. A reporting channel was created for classroom misconduct, routed outside the direct department hierarchy. Dr. Brooks called it policy. Students called it the Hayes Standard. Jordan hated that at first. Then Emily told him, "It's not naming the pain, it's naming the protection." He accepted that, slowly. In November, Jordan presented his compressed symmetry method at the Caldwell Undergraduate Research Colloquium. The room was smaller than Astor Hall, but more intimidating in a different way. Faculty, graduate students, visiting scholars, and local high school teachers filled every seat. His mother sat in the front row, wearing her best navy dress, the one she saved for church and hospital award ceremonies. She had taken the night off. Jordan knew what that cost. In his hoodie pocket was the broken pocket watch. Before stepping to the microphone, he opened it and looked at the stopped hands. 7:16. For years, that time had meant the moment his father left. Now, as the auditorium quieted, Jordan understood it differently. A clock can stop. A lesson can continue. He stepped up. "My father repaired watches," he said. His voice shook once, then steadied. He did not have a university title. He did not publish papers. But he taught me that every complicated machine has a rhythm inside it. Gears repeat. Springs store memory. Pendulums return. And if you listen carefully enough, even a broken mechanism will tell you where the truth is hiding. His mother pressed a tissue to her mouth. Jordan continued. This method began in a watch shop, not a research lab. It came from asking whether equations, like machines, sometimes look complicated because we have not found their rhythm yet. He looked out at the audience, at Dr. Brooks, at Emily, at Daniel Larkin, at Nathaniel Price, who had come and sat quietly near the aisle, at Professor Whitmore, standing in the back, not as the center of the room, not as the owner of the room, just as one person there to listen. Jordan took a breath. "Before I begin, I want to say something that is not mathematical, but matters to mathematics. There are students who are brilliant before anyone calls them brilliant. There are children solving hard problems in public libraries, in crowded apartments, on borrowed laptops, after work shifts, after grief, after being told they are lucky just to be in the room. The auditorium was completely still. If we only recognize intelligence after it performs a miracle under pressure, then we are not discovering talent, we are exhausting it. Dr. Brooks lowered her eyes. Whitmore did too. Jordan looked at the first slide. A small gear appeared beside the title, Symmetry Compression in Recursive Boundary Operators. Jordan Hayes, Caldwell University. He smiled faintly. Then he began. The talk was not perfect. He stumbled over one explanation. He skipped a line and had to return. A microphone squealed halfway through the proof. But no one laughed. They waited. That, Jordan realized, was part of respect too. Not pretending someone never makes mistakes, giving them room to continue. When the talk ended, the room stood. His mother stood first. She did not understand every line of the proof. She understood enough. Her son had walked into a room that tried to shrink him and had not become small. After the applause, Whitmore approached Jordan near the side aisle. He did not offer his hand immediately. He had learned something. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "your explanation of the second transformation was clearer than mine has ever been." Jordan looked at him. "Thank you." Whitmore hesitated. "I am reviewing my old seminar notes, not for publication, for error and for tone." Jordan nodded. "That's good. It is late." "Yes," Jordan said, "but not useless." Whitmore accepted that. No dramatic forgiveness, no easy redemption, just the beginning of accountability. Months later, Jordan returned to Astor Hall 314 alone. It was evening. The building was nearly empty. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows. The blackboards had been cleaned, but a faint ghost of old chalk remained in the corners. He walked to the front of the room, the same floor, the same boards, the same aisle he had walked down while people laughed. He took a piece of chalk from the tray and stood still for a long moment. Then he wrote one sentence in the center of the board. "Genius is not always loud. Sometimes it sits quietly in the back row." He looked at it, then added a second line beneath it. "Respect should not wait for proof." He thought of his father's hands, his mother asleep in scrubs, Emily standing up while afraid, Daniel choosing responsibility over comfort, Nathaniel admitting he had laughed, Dr. Brooks writing "valid" beneath the proof, Whitmore placing his silver pen down. A whole system did not change because Jordan was brilliant. It changed because the truth had witnesses who finally refused to look away. That mattered. Because somewhere else, another student was sitting in the back row with a hoodie, a broken laptop, a borrowed textbook, a parent working nights, a mind full of patterns, and a room full of people ready to underestimate them. Jordan hoped the room would do better, but hope alone was not policy. So Caldwell built policy, and Jordan kept working. He published his first paper the following spring with Dr. Brooks as faculty mentor, and a dedication only one sentence long. "For Marcus Hayes, who taught me that truth has rhythm." The paper did not make him famous overnight. Not really. Academic fame moves strangely. But among mathematicians who cared about recursive structures, the name Jordan Hayes began to travel, this time not as a hidden username, as himself. JH-17 did not disappear. It became a footnote in his biography, a door he had walked through, not a mask he had to keep wearing. At the end of the year, Jordan visited his father's old watch shop. It had been rented to someone else, now a phone repair store with bright LED signs and cases of cracked screens in the window. But the old brass bell above the door was still there. He stood outside for a while. Then he took the broken pocket watch from his hoodie. For the first time since 7:16 p.m. on the day Marcus died, Jordan opened the back. The fault was simple. A displaced jewel bearing, a loosened screw, a gear out of alignment. He could have fixed it in minutes. Instead, he smiled and closed it again. Not yet. Some things do not need to tick to keep time. Some things keep time by reminding us what brought us here. If this story made you think of someone who was underestimated because of how they looked, where they came from, how quietly they spoke, or what the room assumed before they had a chance to answer, write their name in the comments. If you believe classrooms should discover brilliance, not humiliate it, share this with someone who needs to remember that respect should come before recognition. And subscribe for more stories where the overlooked are finally seen, the powerful are held accountable, and justice begins the moment one person refuses to laugh with the crowd. Because the student in the old hoodie was never the joke. The joke was a professor believing intelligence had a dress code. The mistake was a room laughing before it listened. And the lesson was written in chalk across 3 blackboards. Math does not care what you wear. Truth does not care who doubts you. And sometimes, the quietest student in the back row is the one person in the room who can solve what everyone else called impossible.